The following podcast is brought to you by the Crime Prevention 101 Safety Store, your one-stop shop for personal safety. Come by and browse at crimeprevention101.com.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101, the podcast with an optimistic perspective on a sober subject. The views and ideas expressed on this program are strictly those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the host, associate participants, or sponsors. Now, here's your host, Crime Prevention Specialist Susan Bartelstone.
And welcome. This is Susan Bartelstone, and what a perfect time to talk about self-defense, because January is Self-Defense Awareness Month. And we all know it. The crime rate is rising all over the country. So as always, I've got some important safety tips and resources for you at the end of the show. So make sure to stick around for that. Now, I got my buddy here with me today, Lydia Perez, who does everything technical around here. Hi, Lydia.
Hey, everyone. How you doing? Hi, Susan.
Hi. So now, Lydia, you know that I started out my career teaching self-defense, primarily to women, right?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
And I taught for many years until I actually branched out into crime prevention work. So now, Lydia, when you hear the word self-defense or fighting an attacker, what goes through your mind?
Well, for me, it's always been fight or flight. It's get ready, something's coming, and I have to make a quick decision. And normally what that leads to is a little bit of fear, a little bit of panic, and then the deer in headlights look.
Yeah, it's just sort of freezing up in fear and panic kind of thing.
100%, yeah.
Now, did you ever take a self-defense course?
No, oddly enough, I have not. Everything that I've seen about self-defense has been through YouTube videos. They're not the best videos to learn stuff from. And I've also, believe it or not, I've seen some of your published content, which, you know, has brought me up to speed with the terminologies and things that are happening and so forth. And so there is this better sense of awareness, but I would like to take a self-defense course.
It's really a must, considering, and Lydia and I are both in New York City, and the crime rate is definitely going up, and attacks are increasing. So we're going back to the bad old days, really. But it's really important. A self-defense course, usually it's about 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. You don't need to be a martial artist in order to get yourself out of a lot of dangerous situations. But today I have a very special guest. We're going to talk about that. This is my longtime self-defense teacher, Matt Temkin. And anyone who knows me knows about Matt Temkin, the profound effect that he's had on my life and on my career. We've got to take a quick break. And when we come back, you're going to hear what Matt Temkin is doing nowadays.
If you're feeling insecure or apprehensive about your safety in the world today, and you should be, if you're looking for the best pepper spray, the best tasers or alarms, or innovative personal safety devices, if you're looking for ebooks to help you heal from trauma, to deal with bullies, to learn self-defense, or whatever concerns you, the Safety Store is where nationally recognized crime prevention specialist Susan Bartelstone has curated the products she recommends and uses herself. Tons of free safety advice is available if you need immediate help. And while you're there, be sure to get your free copy of Susan's guide, Keeping Yourself Safe, All-Time Top Tips. That's the Crime Prevention 101 Safety Store at crimeprevention101.com.
Matthew Temkin is an internationally known defensive tactics and firearm expert with more than 50 years' experience. He was a retired police officer from the New York City court system, yet a prolific writer, and he's trained extensively with many of the legendary experts in the field of hand-to-hand combat and point shooting. And I'm talking experts like the famed World War II combat instructor Colonel Rex Applegate, Carl Sestari, who is a giant in this field, and Marine Sergeant Charlie Nelson, and his very own father, Ben, who was a World War II Derby Ranger. In the past, Matt has trained police and individual military personnel in Sweden, in Poland, in the UK, and of course in the United States, and he's trained civilians like me, because I have been his grasshopper. And for those of you who never watched the old Kung Fu TV show, that means his student, and he my revered teacher, since 1983 when he was teaching self-defense for the New York City Task Force Against Rape. And I may be one of the few people in the world that can call him Matty. So Matty, welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
Oh, thank you. Nice introduction.
I thought so. All right, let's talk a little bit about hand-to-hand combat, World War II combatives, and we'll talk about point shooting.
Mm-hmm.
World War II combatives, it's called close quarters combat. We called it defendu for many years. How is it different from other styles of fighting, and particularly martial arts styles?
Well, you have to, first of all, remember that there are different meanings to World War II close combat. All right. The one which I was trained in was the one designed by Fairbairn and Sykes, taught to the British commandos, SOE, and the Home Guard, and to also Rangers, commandos, and those type of units. There are other systems. A lot of people are coming up with their own systems, and they're calling it World War II combatives, but it really isn't. How it's different from martial arts, it's designed to, well, in the words of Colonel Applegate, knock out, maim, and kill. That's what it's designed for. It's not designed for sport or for self-improvement or prayer or anything else. It's designed to close with and kill your enemy. That's
bottom line.
That's how it differs from martial arts, yeah.
There's a lot of arguments within the martial arts field about whether martial arts really is self-defense. Of course, we're not going to discuss that here. But when I've talked to people in the past, I have said, this is the stuff that takes out the martial artists. And they get very upset. So this is the stuff they use in Shanghai. They taught the police this stuff, and they use this stuff to take out the martial artists, the boxers, they call them. So this is the bottom line stuff, right?
Well, it was designed to counter very highly trained martial. It started in the streets of Shanghai at the turn of the century with the Shanghai Police Department. Everyone had to find a system to combat. It wasn't just martial artists he was facing. He was facing gangsters. He was facing kidnappers, extortionists, Chinese Tans. There was a lot of mix in the Shanghai. Yeah, it's designed to be used by anybody in a very short amount of time to take out anybody. And the bottom line is that it's unlike martial arts. You don't wait for the guy to attack you. You attack him first. That's the whole secret.
Especially in World War II, in the commando situations, this was adapted for these elite commandos. And that brings me to my next question, because I know you were trained in this since childhood by your father, Ben, who was a commando. And talk a little bit about your experiences and learning that from him.
Well, I was about 10 years old. Me and him were like kind of wrestling, and all of a sudden his face went blank and he fell down. He threw me against the wall in a stomach throw, which he didn't realize he did it. He just went back in time. So I didn't know what happened. And then I found out that in World War II, my dad had been a ranger, and not just a ranger, but when he came back from overseas after Anzio, he was assigned a instructor of close combat. So he knew his stuff, and he started teaching me when I was like about 10. And, he died in 2019, and we always talked about this stuff. So, yeah, he was my first instructor.
And he really was a hero in World War II. All right, now the interesting thing to me about this system, as opposed to martial arts and fighting, and I'm talking about for even just plain old street situations, not combat situations, is there's about 9 moves. There's about 9 techniques in the whole defendu system.
Well, I wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't
10,
say that.
11.
I never
shoulder
counted.
chop. 9.
I never counted this. There's.
I counted.
All right.
There's not a lot. But Matty, but you've always said, I could teach you in one class what it is, and then you have to practice. There's a whole system, right? It's not like martial arts where you take tests and get grades and everything.
Well, no, but different units would train differently. They train.
Well, I'm not talking about military now. I'm talking about the way it's taught now.
Well, it really isn't being taught now. I've trained a few people who are trying to teach it, but unfortunately, they what they see as gaps, which aren't, because they don't really understand the system, they try to fill in with the other martial arts techniques. So it's being taught now. I mean, I'm still in touch with these people. I taught them. They didn't listen to me. They went off, and I'm not going to correct them. I really don't care anymore what people think. But I was the same way. The stuff that my dad taught me, I thought it had gaps, and I tried to actually fill it in with martial arts. And once I became a court officer and got involved in actual hand-to-hand encounters, I realized the stuff that my dad taught me was the stuff that worked. There were no gaps.
I remember from our training, there was really maybe 9 or 10 basic moves, and you just had to keep practicing them and keep practicing them. So it became very secondary. And then, of course, there is the mindset.
The mindset is everything, yes.
That's 100% of it, really. You don't need skillful, you don't need years of training to master these techniques. So that's the basis of self-defense. It's the difference between martial arts and self-defense, is you can learn the techniques, but you do need to practice and you need to commit.
I mean, there's other reasons to learn martial arts than just fighting. It goes in, it's fun, it's good exercise. I did it for years. I enjoyed it, but if your main interest in self-defense, you're going to be, it's lacking, really, in my opinion.
Well, I can remember my own experience after about 7 years of martial arts when I actually got attacked. And I don't know if you remember this scenario, I got jumped by a guy that was crouched in between 2 parked cars. I didn't see him. And I was on the ground in a second. And I remember, because I had training, so I wasn't panicked, thankfully. Where's the martial arts? And I had never really been taught ground fighting or anything even remotely dealing with self-defense. It was kata and form. And if your hand was out straight, they moved it down a half an inch. Yeah,
I remember those days.
Karate. Yes, those days. So that's when I switched to self-defense, which was a whole different ballgame. So I hope I clarified that a little bit, because most of the audience that I'm going to be addressing are not going to be pros, the people you talk with. They're going to be people who need to know that with a commitment and some basic knowledge, you've got a good chance, depending on the scenario of the attack.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, our goal is not to fight the guy to the death. It's to escape. It's to avoid number one. And then, if you have to fight, it's to fight to try to escape. It's not to knock the guy out or anything.
I just wanted to put that framework for hand-to-hand. Now, what you've been known for more lately, or the second half of your life, is the point shooting.
Yeah, combat shooting.
And you were taught and worked with legendary combat instructor Rex Applegate, who was the foremost American expert in this fighting style. Talk a little bit about point shooting and your relationship with him.
Well, I was trained with Carl Sesteri, and I mentioned that I was trying to get in touch with Colonel Applegate, and Carl actually had his address. This is like 91. I sent him a letter, and I said that my dad had been in Darby's Rangers. So he wrote back to me. This was before computers and, texting and stuff. It was all snail mail. So he said that he actually was a good friend with Colonel Darby. Darby was stationed in Washington, D.C. for a few months, and he would go out to where Applegate was training people. So I started, just asking him questions and letters, and then we started making phone calls. And then in 96, he said, why don't you come out to Oregon to my ranch with some of your friends, and we can go over the stuff personally, which we were there July of 96 for about 8-9 days. And, we went over a lot of stuff, and he was just a fun guy to kind of like talk to, hang out with. He was an extremely intelligent man. He had done a lot of stuff in the war. He would give out information begrudgingly, but after a while, he would start opening up a little bit, not as much as I'd like to, of course.
And he was revered. He was the foremost exponent of this kind of fighting, this style that they taught.
Oh, yeah. Anybody who knows World War II history, he was recruited by Wild Bill Donovan, who ran the OSS, Office of Strategic Services. And he was sent to England to train with Sykes and to learn everything there was to learn about close combat. And I think he said in 93, he was given that mission in 1942, and he's still learning.
And your father trained in England with the...
Well, he joined the Rangers while he was still in Fort Benning, Georgia. They were recruiting because they were about to form 2 extra battalions. So he was shipped over first to Scotland for a few weeks to get some basic training. Then he was shipped to North Africa in like May of 43, where they started forming the 3rd and 4th Ranger battalions. And he was put into the 4th Battalion.
Did he know Applegate at all?
Oh, no. Applegate by that point was back in America.
Ah, okay. All right. So tell this audience, what is point shooting? We don't know. Tell us what it is.
Well, most combat shooting or police training or even military training, my son is a instructor in the Marine Corps, and he teaches pistols. And I just had to laugh what he's teaching. It's just silly. It's 2 hands, get the gun up to eye level. It's shooting at distances of 7, 12, 15, 25, 50 yards. And anyone who's been in any confrontation knows that most gunfights happen within 0 to like 8 feet because there's something going on. And the actual techniques designed for that type of situations are different than what's commonly being taught. Point shooting is mainly with 1 hand. It's up close. There's no time for a sight picture. There's no time for any of the basics of, say, marksmanship. It's down and dirty street fight. You happen to have in your hand a gun, but you would combine combat skills, hand-to-hand combat skills with your pistol. It's totally different. And just yesterday, I was talking. I work at a range part-time here, and I was talking to this kid at the range who's in the Army Reserves infantry, and he was showing me how they teach shooting. It's all 2 hands, come up, pick up your front sight. I'm laughing, saying, "Well, what would you do if I came at you right now with a knife?" So I picked up a rubber knife and came screaming at him, and he just freaked. He didn't know what to do. He said, well, I said, how far do you think gunfights happen? He goes, 11, 12 yards. I go, no, they happen more like 11, 12 inches. I said, kid, you better get some good training because...
Just look at the TikTok and you'll see they video these shootings right there in real life. They're not.
Well, a lot of the TikTok videos are from badge cams. Police officers do have to engage at longer distances. They're doing car stops and stuff. They're more
talking about the police raters. I'm talking about these criminals videoing themselves shooting people. I've seen.
I don't watch those. I don't watch those.
Oh, okay.
Videos.
Well, you've never seen. I
see YouTube videos, but yeah, and I mean, yeah, it's scary.
It is scary, and the scariest thing. I see you're very happily ensconced down in South Carolina now.
Oh, there's crime down here.
But not like New York City. And the scary for me is these people now just walking along, minding their own business, and somebody comes up behind them and smacks them in the head with a baseball bat, or just sucker punches them.
Well, here's the deal. You have to practice as a lifestyle situational awareness. No one should be able to walk up to you and put their hands on you without you seeing it coming a mile away.
Matthew, it's Lydia. If I can interrupt for a second, you said something very interesting, and you said situational awareness. I like the term. I don't know much about it. Can you give me some pointers on situational awareness?
Yeah. The goal of self-defense or shooting is never to have to use this shit, okay, or this stuff. It's to be aware of what's around you at all times. It's not paranoia, okay? It's spotting something before it happens. Mm-hmm. Your body is going to pick up on clues. The old saying, you feel the hair standing up on the back of your neck. You know something's wrong. Now you have 2 choices. You can act on it by looking around, or you can say, oh, I'm just being paranoid, or I'm just being a racist, this guy's black or Italian or whatever, and ignore it. Or you can walk around with your headphones on and listening to like TikTok videos and not have a clue what's going on around you. Criminals don't want to fight. They want a victim. If they see someone walking around, looking around and, being aware, they may not choose that person for a victim. They may choose somebody easy. There's lots of victims out there. So being aware of your surroundings, who's around you, not letting people, if possible, get that close, especially if you have that funny feeling. You should see something. No one has ever surprised me. There's an old saying in the military, a commander can be forgiven for being defeated, but never for being surprised.
Wow.
Yeah. Being aware of your surroundings, looking around, and certain things. Like I lived in bad areas of New York City before I became a code officer. I drove a taxi cab in the 70s. I lived in in the East Village. There were times I was walking home late at night and I felt uncomfortable. I'd walk in the center of the street to avoid, alleys and stuff like that. When you come around a corner, instead of just going around the corner, swing wide so you can, peek around. It becomes a lifestyle almost. And I've never gotten stopped for a speeding ticket. I've seen the cops coming a mile away.
That's amazing.
I think part of the problem here in New York City, anyway, and this may be true outside of it, but you've got a lot of mentally ill people.
Yes, you do.
And that they don't care. Most crooks don't want a problem, but they don't care. And they're the ones you walk past them, and for some reason, and I always do get on edge if I see somebody that I feel is mentally ill. There's a vibe from them, but I try to walk away as fast as I can, but there's too many.
That's true.
I'm going to give some good tips at the end of this interview, by the way.
The old saying in training, you can do everything right and die, and you can do everything wrong and win.
That's why they say there's no guarantees.
But these people, I watch these videos, these people who are being sucker punched or pushed on the subway. First of all, I never stand next to the edge of the tracks on the subway. I always stood back. And when a train was coming in, I would put my back against something like a pillar or the staircase. Even if there was, it was just, I'm not peeking over.
You're right about that. I mean, me too. But yet.
These people being sucker punched, I watch the videos. They don't have any clues that there's anything coming.
No, and they're not.
They're not aware.
All right, Maddie, let's take a quick break. I can't believe it. I love talking to you. We're coming up on a commercial, so just hold on. And when we come back, you're going to hear what Matt Temkin is doing nowadays.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. Susan would like to remind you that no absolutes exist in a crime scenario, and no advice can possibly address every variable. Each situation should be evaluated individually and responded to in a way you instinctively judge best. It's Susan's aim on this show to provide you with the information and options that will help you make that instinctive assessment quickly and safely. And if you're already a survivor of the kind of crime we're talking about on the show today, or any other crime for that matter, please remember that there are no right or wrong responses in a criminal encounter, and nothing that happened to you was your fault. Even if you think you used bad judgment in a situation and left yourself vulnerable, that's never an excuse for a crime or for violence. So please, call yourself a survivor, not a victim, and understand that with time, distance, and the proper professional help, you can put what happened into perspective and get on with your life.
So, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, Lydia, you're kind of the civilian in the room here.
Yes, I am.
Do you have questions for Maddie? Because I sometimes don't see the forest for the trees.
Well, for me, one of the biggest things that Matthew said was the situational awareness. Living in New York City, I agree with you, Susan. People pop up out of nowhere. How do you prepare for something like that? Particularly, I know that a little bit later on, one of your questions, we're going to talk about natural startle reflex. For me, a person who doesn't necessarily have a gun or wish to carry a gun, how do I break from that deer in headlights syndrome? How do I get out of that if someone's going to attack me? How will I be ready? That's one of my biggest fears, living in New York, particularly getting on the train and so forth. So if you can talk a little bit about that, that'll be great.
Maddie, I'm going to let you talk, and then I'm going to I'm going to address that question too.
Okay. The reason why people freeze up is basically not being prepared. See, one of the problems is that unless you have a job that deals with violence, you could be law enforcement, security, you could be working in a mental health facility. The first couple of times that you have an encounter, like, me on the job, I froze up also, and my partners would jump in to help me out. After a while, you don't, because you get experience. Preparation would be the key, but it's kind of hard because people teach, like, pretending to be strong and all this stuff, but it's a bluff because they have nothing to back it up, and how much, the best thing is to make yourself not an easy target. All right. You have to, live your life. Try not to travel alone at night. Take an Uber, take a cab, try to avoid certain areas. But if you are confronted, sometimes the best thing you can do is keep your distance and look the guy in the eye and say, what do you want? Mm-hmm. And then you have to play it from there. If you do have to use physical force, it is scary. The one thing I tell people is that if you train in a system, like I've been in fights or situations where I just moved into the guy and the guy was down and we had him down and I did not know what I did. I just reacted. That's the key. You learn a system where you make your techniques and your situations flexible and reflexive. And they got to be simple. For example, my son is a Marine and he came home on leave last summer. And, he's teaching firearms. He's teaching hand-to-hand combat. And he was kind of teasing me like, he says, come on, old man. He puts his hands up. He starts circling around me. All I did, I took my fingers. I jabbed him in his eyes. I didn't hit him. And he backed up and I kicked him in his balls. And not hard, of course. I said, there you go, kid. Not bad for some stupid old man, huh?
That's 2 of the 9 techniques of defendo.
The answer to your question is you'd be surprised what you can do when you're backed into a corner and you have no choice.
Yeah.
You need some training.
As long as you've got some knowledge.
You have to have some knowledge.
A little bit of knowledge.
Yes. You don't need much knowledge, okay? It's all attitude. Remember, unless you're being targeted because somebody wants you dead or something, they're not looking to attack you personally. They're looking to attack someone who's a victim. You also have the option of compliance if it's just like a robbery. They say, I want your wallet.
That is what you're going to do.
This stage, robbery? You pay my credit cards. Go ahead, take them. Enjoy.
Here's my wallet. You might have better luck.
If push comes to shove, there's a classic case Masada writes about. There's a woman who was like 9 months pregnant, and her and her husband were kidnapped by this psycho, and they're terrified. He locks the husband in the trunk of the car, and they're driving around, and the woman, he slaps her. She's terrified. He checks into a motel. He tells the wife, check in. He tells the clerk, I'm going to kill your husband. He leaves the husband in the trunk, takes her into the room. He's going to rape her. She's begging, I don't want you to hurt my baby. Let's do something else, whatever. He says no. He smacks her again. He puts his gun down. As he takes his pants off, she picks up the lamp and she cracks him across his skull and she just about kills him because she just didn't give a shit anymore.
And this is self-defense. This is the kind of thing that you teach people.
You'd be surprised. Yeah, you'd be surprised what you can do.
It's not just fighting hands and feet.
When I first started teaching Sue and the women at SAFE, I said to them, if you really want to know the mental attitude of combat, read the book Cujo. They go, what? About the dog?
Really? Cujo?
Cujo.
Wow.
About the dog.
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't read the book, so I had to explain to them after about a month because they wouldn't listen to me. I said, the premise of Cujo is that the Cujo was a St. Bernard who went rabid. He was a very friendly dog, but he went rabid. And he killed his owners who lived out somewhere in the country. Woman pulls up with a 6-year-old son, and they're locked. It's on a July 4th weekend, so it's very hot and there's no one coming. She's locked in this car for 3 days, terrified. The dog always attacks her. Finally, her son is dying. She comes out and she picks up a baseball bat, and the dog comes at her and she says, okay, let's do it, you motherfucker. And she kills the dog with a bat. Unfortunately, Stephen King, the bastard, lets the kid die anyway from heat stroke. But the bottom line is, everyone has that point where they're going to fight for their life. The point is, you want that to be as soon as possible and not when it's too late. We taught women back in the 80s who they said they couldn't hurt anybody. Okay, what about someone's about to stab your 6-month-old son? Well, there you go. Okay, there you go. That attitude has to be there. The techniques, like I was trying to say before, most martial arts, to their credit, they will get you in shape, and being in shape is a large part of self-defense. But they're too technique-orientated. It's all about techniques, and you're doing the techniques. The techniques are meaningless. My father always said, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. You use a third-rate technique, but do it aggressively.
Well, you don't have to have a perfect technique in order to defend yourself. Now, Maddie, we could talk for another 2 hours about this stuff. I want to segue into what's going on now. Let's say the worst has happened. We followed your ideas, and I'm going to, at the end of the show, I'm going to give some tips people can download from my website and all of that. But what happens, we had a case here just recently. Guy, bodega owner.
Yes.
Guy comes into the bodega with a girlfriend. He's robbing the guy, and the owner of the bodega kills him in defending himself.
I saw the video, yes.
Yes. And for quite a while, he was in trouble. Now,
yes, he was.
You are doing something now that we're telling people in this show, and we're going to help people in this podcast to defend themselves. But if they do, and they get into trouble, tell us about what you're doing now that could be of help. Wow, Lydia, when Maddie says we could talk for another 2 hours, he really means we could talk for another 2 days about the self-defense systems and different ways to stay safe. And even though I often disagree with him on certain minor points, he's just one of the best around. Now, we actually covered some really important information in the last part of the interview about what to do if the worst happens and the victim gets in trouble for defending him or herself.
Right.
So we decided to air the rest of Matt Temkin's interview in a separate podcast that will drop the week after this one.
Yes, agreed. That was the best course of action to take. It was some great information that he really laid on us at the end of the podcast. So it was best to separate them so that everybody could access the information freely and do what they need to do.
Yeah, and we gave you a little bit of a tease at the end of the show. So this is something that you are going to want to see.
Definitely.
And to hear. But yeah. All right. So now, Lydia, let's wrap this one up. And Lydia, in addition to being Self-Defense Awareness Month, January is also Stalking Awareness Month and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So to get a hold of Maddie, you can reach him at Matthew Temkin or TEMKIN Matthew @yahoo.com. We got some tips on self-defense as well as on stalking. We think that these tips might be helpful for you. We're going to put the links to them in the show notes for today's show in the Crime Prevention 101 podcast page on YouTube, so you guys can easily access it. For information on self-defense, you can visit the National Women's Martial Arts Federation, which is www.nwmaf.org. And be sure to check out our crimeprevention101.com safety tips and resources. We keep adding content to them all the time. You can also see the Stalking Resource Center at victimsofcrime.org. You can also go to stalkingawareness.org and victimconnect.org. There's also the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE. You can also visit the Human Trafficking Organization National Anti-Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888.
Now, just a quick reminder, you can join us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook, Crime Prevention 101 Safety Store. It's on Instagram. It's on LinkedIn. And, of course, at crimeprevention101.com, where you can get more information about my wonderful guests and show topics. You can listen to the show as many times as you want, get on the mailing list, and get my free all-time top tips, my top safety tips guide. It's keeping yourself safe, all-time top tips, free for you. And hey, I've gotten some wonderful suggestions for future shows on Facebook, Lydia. Did you know that?
Yes, I did. You have been wonderfully telling me how people are reaching out to us, which is so exciting.
I told you a few times. Yes. And that way we can continue to present topics and resources that will be meaningful to people, to their safety, their quality of life. So please send me your suggestions, your requests.
Exactly. If you want to go old school, you can send an email to solutions@crimeprevention101.com.
All right. That's the new email, right?
Yep.
All right. Next week, the next podcast, In the event that bad stuff happens, self-defense liability insurance. You are not going to want to miss this. And you know what we say around here, it'd be a crime not to listen.
So stay tuned and stay safe.